Well, welcome everyone. Wyoming, this is today our fourth out of five special culture change conference sessions that we're doing online. It's been fun to call it March Madness because it kind of has been for us, but in a really good way. And thank you all for joining. Uh, my name is Carmen Bowman. I'm involved with this grant project, um, and I'll put in an advertisement looking for 3 nursing homes to join the second year of the culture change, more intensive part of the project, where you get more intensive coaching and you commit to implementing at least 3 culture change practices. And we know that things are really hard right now, and we really want to honor that and respect that, and own up to that. And I'm saying that today, guys, because the community meeting could very well be a practice that can contribute, that can help, that cannot be in addition to, but a tool to use during a crisis and during hard times. And Barry will talk a lot more about that. He's being very sensitive to the times we're in. And we thank you for that, Barry. And I'd like to introduce you all to Barry Barkin. Oh boy, that name in the culture change movement. Look at my face, you guys. He is famous. He and his wife, Debbie, they started culture change in 1977. And you kind of know what was going on in the world then, and you're going to hear it from Debbie. They've always considered people's rights in all their work. And they've developed the Live Oak Regenerative Community. He'll explain that, with the intention of transforming the culture of where elders live and gather by promoting role, love that, meaning, and empowerment in the decisions that impact people's lives who live there. So for 17 years, they operated the Live Oak Living Center. It was a nationally recognized model for creating a loving and empowering community in a long-term care home. By the way, everyone, I hear a lot of men from the culture change movement admit that it's all about love. Barry's one of them. I really admire that. In 2011, they brought the regenerative community to a home in Israel. And today there's more than 150 residential and daycare settings that are pursuing culture change by participating in the regenerative community in Israel, if I have that right, Barry. They also have developed something called the the community developer. He's going to tell you about that. And he has written a book called The Way of the Champion. And so with that, Barry, they're all yours, and Wyoming, Barry's all yours. Thank you so much, Barry, for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Carmen. I'm really honored and privileged to be here today. And so, do you want to put the slides on now, Carmen?
Sure, you bet.
Thanks.
You bet. See, he wanted to meet y'all first, of course. Can you see him?
Yes.
Great.
So you all notice the Indian paintbrush, the Wyoming state flower in the corner. My tribute to you all. And first of all, I want to honor you all, because all of you who work with nursing homes, who are ombudsmen, who are connected in any way, are really the unsung heroes of the pandemic. And it's taken its toll. I know it's taken its toll. I know that there's a sadness, a depression, and anxiety. Staffing is down. You want to put the next slide on? And nursing homes are really under fire. The Biden administration is now responding to the problems in nursing homes by saying, well, let's just hire more surveyors, and not looking at the root causes of the problems in nursing homes. And so what's really needed now more than anything is an opportunity to create joy and meaning, within each home. And in many ways, this this system of nursing homes, where nursing homes are now, are not all that different in terms of the sadness, the lack of hope that pervaded the environment when we first went into a nursing home all those many years ago. Carmen, there's something that I don't know if you see it on your screen, but on my screen, it's making it hard to see the whole slide. Is that true on yours?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the video panel, but I'll get rid of it, guys. No problem.
Okay, and then maybe you want to move to the next nursing home, the next
Sure.
slide.
Bet.
And so the official title of this workshop, of this presentation, is that retention is a byproduct of community meeting. And I'd like to start by asking for your thoughts about what are the crucial factors that drive the retention and recruitment of staff. Anybody want to speak to that?
And Barry, you'd like for people just to unmute themselves, right?
Yeah, unmute yourself and speak to it, please.
Or in the chat. And why don't you just
So-
ask again? Yeah, go ahead, Brittany.
I would say for us, since COVID started, I mean, healthcare has always had a retention issue just because burnout is really high. But since COVID, that is so much harder because we are short-staffed, and the response for that is instead of trying to hold on to the people that we have or make them happy, we'll hire contract workers, or we'll, whatever we've got to do to be staffed, but it doesn't really matter where they come from.
Yeah, that's pretty hard. Anybody else? So I think that that the pandemic has really torn the heart out of so many nursing homes and made staffing really, really difficult. And yet there are a number of factors that I think contributes. If you want to move to the next slide, Carmen, there are a number of factors that I think contribute to retaining staff. And it has to do with meaning, it has to do with hope, it has to do with pride and self-respect, and those things that make people feel happy and proud of the homes where they are and the places where they work. And I don't know very many statistics about those things that support staff retention. But I do know that for 17 years, Debbie and I operated the Live Oak Living Center in El Sobrante, California. And even when the job market was restricted, even when things were tight, and they've never been tighter than they are now, I know that, my heart goes out to all of you. But even when things were tight, our workers, our employees, were our outreach workers. They went into people, their churches, their neighbors, their family members, and they were our chief recruiters. And never once did we have to use registry. And so what was the formula to that? What was it that made the staff retention work? And it wasn't only retention. If you go to the next slide, Carmen, it wasn't only about retention. It's about the quality of employees and their commitment. I remember one time I was walking down the hall of the Live Oak Living Center, and there were a couple of nursing assistants standing outside of CNAs. They were standing outside of one of the rooms. And I started chatting they were standing and chatting with each other. And I went up to them, was chatting with them, and I said, by the way, I haven't seen Veronica around here in a long time. Veronica was a relatively new hire. And one of them said to me, oh, Mr. Barkin, you see the best in everyone. That's a good trait, I hope. But we saw Veronica as she was with the residents. And we told her that that's not the way we do it with residents around here. We listen to what they want. We help them the way they want to be helped. We don't rush them. And let's show you how to do it. And they gave her a demonstration of how to deliver care. And the CNAs I was talking to said to me, and she just wouldn't do it our way. And we said to her, there are lots of nursing homes around here that do it the way you do. So please leave here and go to work for one of them. And so the staff members fired her, actually fired her, because she wasn't doing it the way, according to our standards and our way. And more than anything, that kind of attitude derives from a culture that promotes love and respect. And another slide. And so what's the heart of the culture? So the daily community meeting is the epicenter of the culture. It's a resident-centered meeting that all people in the home, ombudsmen, family members, sometimes state surveyors, everybody participates in. It's the only gathering place in the home where everyone comes together as equals, hats off, respecting one another for who they are and what they can contribute. And more than anything else, the daily community meeting is alive. It's a living organism in which each person learns, grows more healthy and more connected, and life thrives. So later on if you look at the next slide, later on in our presentation, we'll talk about what goes on in a community meeting and how it's organized. But first, let's talk about two ways to view the nursing home through a lens of a regenerative, growing, life-making culture and how it is a factor in staff retention. So can we look at the next slide? So I'm going to ask you to try and clear out your minds a little bit, to clear out your minds and open them to what may be new ideas. And Thich Nhat Hanh said it when he said, for things to reveal themselves for us. Thich Nhat Hanh was a Buddhist priest who became very influential in the United States. For things to reveal themselves to us, we need to be ready to abandon our views about them. So I'd like you to open up your mind, open your hearts particularly, and let's look at the next slide. We talk a lot about multiculturalism, but the community of the home is really one multiculture. Whatever our role, we need to reconceptualize the way we see our field of operations as one interconnected, interdependent multiculture. It's multi-generational, it's multi-racial, it's multi-ethnic, it's multi-religious. People come from the right wing, from the left wing, from the center. You know, they come from all areas. And each one is a part of a dynamic and interactive whole. And so in the multiculture, each person's ethnicity and traditions needs to be seen and related to in the home's community. And so this is really important, that we honor everybody's culture. You know, in California, where we've been, it's a much more multicultural environment. But I'm sure that almost every place where people live and age is multicultural, multi-generational. And so my friend Jeff Jarebka, who operated Pinion Management in Colorado and New Mexico, likes to tell the story of when he took over a home that was a predominantly Korean home. And he went to the state and said, you know, we need to recognize the practitioners of Korean healthcare whose model is different than the medical model in the West. And they went along with it. And our home was particularly multicultural. There were people there who were Black, African American, there were people there who were Hispanic, there were people there who were from different Asian countries, there were people there who were Jewish, there were people there who were Christian, there were people there who were Muslim, there were people there who were Sikhs. And so we celebrated everybody's culture. And we did it among the residents and we did it among the staffs. Our potlucks were just outrageous. And one of the great delights I had was when we'd have a staff party, watching staff members from India, Pakistan, China, African Americans dancing the Macarena and knowing all the moves and all the steps. And it's like one culture merged into another so that the home became a greater multiculture. So that's the first thing that I'd like you to think about. The second thing is, on the next slide, the nursing home is a spiritual entity. We think of the nursing home as a place that gets things done, in which it operates according to function, in which everything is detailed by policies and procedures and regulations and budgets and all those things. But we'd like you to propose that you start thinking about the nursing home through a spiritual as well as a functional lens. And let me tell you what I mean by spiritual. Can you turn to the next slide, Carmen, please?
Mm-hmm.
By spiritual, we simply refer to the human spirit. The human spirit. Each of us has within us a spirit. The pandemic has really deflated the human spirit in homes. It's really made great sadness when the spirit is strong. We're joyful. We're filled with happiness. We're more aligned with one another. We're more connected to one another. And when the spirit is weak, it becomes diminished. It becomes diminished. And so what do we mean by spiritual? The human spirit can be enhanced by our policies, by our practices, our actions, and even the words and language that we use. And the human spirit can be diminished by unkindness. It can be diminished by treating people poorly. It can be diminished by organizing them according to our schedule and not what they need and want and how they want to live their lives. So if we go to the next question, I'd like to ask you a question, and I hope that everybody will either respond in person or in the chat, and Carmen, if you'll read what's said in the chat. So what are some of the things you are doing in your role that enhances the human spirit and helps it to thrive and to flourish?
Don't be shy, everybody. This is our time together.
I'm sorry?
I said, don't be shy, everybody.
So, hi, I'll talk some more.
Thank you for breaking the ice.
We do different celebrations, like what everybody does, Cinco de Mayo and Mardi Gras and all kinds of different things like that. We also do Traveling Tuesday, where we go to different countries and do a tour. Sometimes it's a railway tour, sometimes it's a museum, sometimes it's churches, all kinds of different things like that. And the activity that we schedule before that is usually a cooking activity, something we're baking or making for them to enjoy that comes from the same country. And then we do trivia and lots of education and different group discussion about those things. And we're working on trying to get the dining room to buddy up with us and do like Hispanic month, where we have it on Wednesdays. We have a different meal that pertains to that country or comes from that country. Just trying to do different things like that, bring more culture in from outside.
Beautiful. And how does that help the human spirit to thrive?
I think it's great. Even, we're from Wyoming. We have some cultural diversity, but not a ton. and it's really neat to watch them light up. Even when we used to have a nurse who would make us fry bread, and we would do all of those things with her. It just helps them branch out or feel more connected to something, as it does for all of us, myself included. So it just reconnects you with other people. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much for breaking the ice, Brittany. I really appreciate that.
Yep.
Dawn,
we have- yeah,
you put something in the chat. Do you want to say it?
yeah, how about say it? Thank you.
I
Dawn.
just, as an ombudsman, I don't have that much chance of doing things in a group setting, but I just approach each individual kind of in a sincere, person-centered, humanistic kind of way. Just see them as individuals with love and memory and meaning and all those things, and respect that in them.
Very important. Very important. Anybody else want to speak to some of the things you're doing in your role? And by the way, I've seen ombudsmen who walk into a home like in a way that's disrespectful of the spirit of the people they're looking at, and it really diminishes the spirit. So your approach is really, really commendable. Thank you. Anyone else? What are some of the things you're doing in your role that enhances the human spirit and helps it to thrive and to flourish? Courtney, are you about to say something?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Courtney, she just joined, but I don't know if you'd be willing to answer, Courtney. You heard the question.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to move on to the next slide
Sure.
then.
Okay.
Here's another kind of question for you. Is there anything you see where you work that diminishes the human spirit?
People being in a rush, people neglecting other people, don't have time for the people, seeing them as patients and not people.
Mm.
Thanks, Don. I think, Don, that you've named a number of things that are significant and real in terms of the diminution of the human spirit. Treating people like a patient. To be a patient is not a person. It's somebody who's got an illness. Not responding to people in ways that honors them as individuals and as people diminishes the human spirit. Not responding to people's needs, not answering a call bell diminishes the human spirit. Talking in a way that's rough and gruff diminishes the human spirit. All these things diminish the human spirit. And so in our work, in the promotion of community meetings, we're about transforming the environment by beginning with the residents and transforming the way that the world is seen. And if we were to look at the next slide and think about Star Trek. Did anybody ever see Star Trek on television? You know, and they had the prime directive. Imagine the prime directive in a home is always seek to nurture the healthy flow of the human spirit in all our policies, practice, and interactions, and all that we say and do. How do you think? Take a moment and think about that. What would be life like if that became the prime directive? If it trumped every policy and every procedure in your home or community or in your work? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
And I notice I enjoy, Carmen, the work you do and the people you bring in. I work for a QIO. So I work basically with nursing homes indirectly and acute care facilities. And I've long believed, I've been doing this work 16 years, but I've long believed there's a disconnect between health and care. And the reason I attend these is just, I like listening to you talk about people the way you do. And the people like Barry today. And it's probably a grounding opportunity for whenever it's in and about. So I thank you for what you do. Unfortunately, I have another call I need to go on, but that's why I attend from Hawaii. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So anybody else have any thoughts about what it would be like if that became the prime directive of every home that trumped all policies, all procedures? It was the first and most important thing. What it could be like, what our environments might be like.
It'd be like the Garden of Eden.
Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden. Well, I love the Eden alternative. So, and I think this is very much in keeping with what the Eden alternative teaches. And so these are two very important ideas that I wanted to just lay out as a foundation for what we're going to be talking about further. The idea of seeing the home as a multiculture. Brittany, you spoke to some of the ways in which this has been a significant thing in your home, promoting the love of everybody's culture. Courtney at Granite is saying that she's having connection issues, and she's working on it. Glad you're working on it. Glad you're working on it. And so I think, and the other thing has to do with the spirit, the human spirit, the way that this work is inherently spiritual, the way we can boost and increase the human spirit in people. And I'm not talking about religion here. I'm talking about that spirit that flows through everyone. Believers, atheists, everyone has a spirit within them, and promoting that spirit. And in a way, that's what the community meeting has been about, is to create a place where the human spirit can be developed, can be enhanced, can take root within the culture, can take root within the community. And so I offer these two ideas because if you open the next slide up, Carmen, I offer these two ideas, these two core concepts, because as Mahatma Gandhi said, what we believe becomes our thoughts. Our thoughts become our words. Our words become our actions. Our actions become our habits. They become the things we do repetitively. Our habits become our values. They bring our values to life. And our values become our destiny. Our destiny. You know, we don't stop and think about that very often, but what we're doing is we're creating a destiny for ourselves, for the people we work for one another. that we're creating the future, that everything we do creates the future. And so in a way, that's at the heart of what I'm talking about today, proposing that you think about, is how we recreate the future. How we recreate the future in homes that may be demoralized right now, that may be understaffed, in which the people are demoralized, in which the elders are coming out of isolation, in which staff members are overworked and burdened. And yet, it's all we got, friends. It's all we've got. And you're the heroes who are sticking with it. So would you turn to the next slide, Carmen, please? So what do I mean when I talk about the community meeting as the epicenter of the life within the home? It is a crucial factor in residents being empowered with meaning and connection, and staff members feeling pride and joy in where they work. So right now I'm going to be talking about developing that epicenter within the home. And I'd like to look at the next slide. So I like to watch YouTubes, you know, and I like to go where they take me. And I came across a YouTube of a guy who I didn't fully understand what he was talking about, because he was a evolutionary biologist, and I flunked biology in high school. and so, but I was curious about what he was saying. And he had this statement. He said, human beings are biocultural entities. Human beings are biocultural organisms. And that resonated so deep with me, and I thought about it. And I thought about how that affects our lives, how that affects our work. And so human beings are organisms who interact with and grow and are enabled by and are diminished by the culture or the cultural environment in which we live. And so if we're in a negative culture, then it affects us. It affects how we are. It affects our health. It affects our well-being. It affects our faith. It affects our spirit. And if we're in a positive culture, that sees each human being as learning, growing, and developing, then it enhances our lives. It enriches us, and we become more. And so if we look at the next slide, what we saw in our work was that when we went into the home that we went into back in 1977, and people were demoralized there, and the spirit was way down, and we started our first community meeting on the very first day we were there, and began to infuse the spirit with hope, and infuse the people with identity and meaning. The culture got richer. And as the culture got richer, the people got stronger and happier and healthier. And as they got stronger and happier and healthier, then the culture got stronger. And it became like a very strong dynamic process. And so in a real way, we believe that our work in developing community and long-term care has been the validation of that thesis, even before we heard the thesis. It validated that idea that human beings are indeed biocultural organisms. But you know, maybe the first thing that has to change in elder care is that we need to break out of the medical model. We need to break out of the medical model. You know, nursing homes began in the 60s with the passing of Medicare and Medicaid as basically extended hospitals, places where people went to be cared for, and they were seen there as in terms of their illness, in terms of their pathologies, and everything in the nursing homes were related to their pathologies. But of course, we're much more than our pathologies. Even our illnesses are more than our pathologies. So there are so many stories of people who are healed by faith and by herbs and other kinds of things, that have nothing to do with addressing what's wrong with them, but builds on the health within them. And so this is really core to what we're talking about, that the community helps us to break out of the medical model. A couple of years ago, CMS issued some brilliant new guidelines, interpretive guidelines, which focused on person-centered care. But these only address the pathology of individuals, and only address them from the point of view of their medical needs, and not in terms of creating the environment that promotes health, growth, and well-being. But fortunately, nothing in the regulation stops us from doing that. And so if we look at the next slide, we see that the institutional medical model causes isolation. People are isolated from one another. People are disconnected from the past and future and from the narrative of their lives. And there's lack of meaning in daily life. And these are symptoms of the deep cultural malaise of life within the institution that undermines the quality of life. I got my first glimpse of this in a real way when in 1967 or 68, I visited my grandmother in the nursing home. I lived 300 miles away from where she was. And I had seen her a few months before, and she was not so healthy, but she had a vitality to her. And I visited her in the nursing home, and she was dispirited, totally dispirited. And she said to me, Barry, you don't know how bad things are here for me. You don't know how they treat me. And being a forever optimist, I said to her, don't worry, Grandma. Don't worry, I'll go down and talk to them and we'll get this straightened out. And she got terrified. I had never seen her like this before. And she said to me, Barry, please, you'll only stir things up. You'll only stir things up. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. And that was the first touch of wisdom I had in my life, because I listened to her. And I got in my car and I drove back from Long Island, New York, where she lived in the nursing home, to Richmond, Virginia, where I was living at the time. And all the way back, I couldn't help but think about her. Here she was in a 3-bedroom, and she didn't know the names or anything about the person to the left of her or to the right of her. And in the home, they knew nothing about who she was before she came there. And they had no concept of her being anything more than she was now, as a person who was rapidly deteriorating physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually. They only saw her as she was then, and she was totally disconnected from the narrative of her life. And of course, she had no meaning. And years later, as I began to think about working in long-term care, it's funny how I got involved. I was actually working with people in drug rehabilitation, and we were going to a park once a week. I was loading up my van with folks in the back of my van, and these are some pretty hard people. We got them out of San Quentin and Santa Rita County Prison, County Jail, and because they were addicted in one way or another. And I would go to the park with them, and I would teach them New York street games, and we would play the games. And after each game, I would ask them, who are you when you play the game? What's your role in the game? Who are you in your family of origin? Who are you and what are you here to do was the question I was constantly trying to get at, because I believed I believe that if they could answer that question, it would be for them the beginning of the rehabilitative process. Well, I don't know how much they got that or not. But one day I was sitting under an oak tree in Live Oak Park where we went to play the games. And I was sitting under the oak tree and I heard this voice that I thought was coming from the tree speaking to me. And it said, "Okay, wise guy, who are you and what are you here to do?" And I answered, "Well, I'm here to be a midwife of the paradigm shift." When I said I answered, it was a voice I didn't even know within myself. I had only heard that voice once before when I was in an auto accident in Vermont. And the car tossed me down a hill and it rolled over me. And I felt myself leave my body. And I heard this voice in me that said, "Is it time yet?" And I heard this other voice that I had never heard before. And that was the same voice that said, "Okay, wise guy, who are you and what are you here to do?" And that voice said to me, "No, it's not. Go back." And so that the voice that said, "Is it time yet?" is the same voice that said, "Well, I'm here to help midwife the paradigm shift that we're in the middle of right now." But then this more practical voice said, "Well, how would I go about doing that?" And at that moment, I remembered my grandmother in the nursing home. And I thought to myself, this is where I need to begin this work. And that what my grandmother was suffering from was a deep cultural malaise. And so what needed to happen was that the culture of the home needed to be transformed. And so, Carmen, I think it's now time for questions.
I didn't quite get that. Try tapping above to edit.
Yes, it is.
But before that, I just want to say that there's, if you look at the next slide,
Mhm.
that y'all are familiar with the Pioneer Network. It's meeting this year in Colorado. I hope some of you can get a way to go there and find a way. It's really the epicenter of the culture change movement in the United States. And early on, we decided that what we needed to do in the Pioneer Network was to define our values. And so a core value of the Pioneer Network is that community is the antidote to institutionalization. Seen from the other point of view is that we want to transform institutions into communities. We want to transform institutions into communities. And so I'd like to now answer any questions anybody has.
I really enjoyed this. You know, a lot of times when I'm talking with a person there at the nursing home, when I'm sitting there with them face to face, I try to envision them as they were when they were young. What were they like when they were in high school? And I try and interact with them in that way. Not like as an old, decrepit, or, you know, we call people schizophrenics instead of a person with schizophrenia. Sometimes just interact with people by labels instead of as people. You know what I'm saying, Barry?
I hear what you're saying, my friend. I hear what you're saying. And I'd like to add another dimension to that, which may be.
You have a text message.
Sorry.
It's okay, my friend. I just did the same thing trying to see what time it was. And so, so it's not only who they were in high school, but it's who they can be.
Right. Potential.
Who they're becoming.
Yes, absolutely.
Nurture that.
Absolutely.
Anyone else have any questions or comments you want to make? Carmen?
I don't have a question, but as you're talking about who they can be and who they used to be and who, you know, who they are, They aren't the diabetic. They aren't the heart attack. They aren't the stroke. One of my late activity in the evening is at 5:30, which is, super late. But my group of residents who go regularly call it activities after dark. And they've been playing this game called Pando, which is kind of like Cards Against Humanity, but not as terrifying. And the executive director for my building was walking through on her way out one evening and heard them talking about edible underwear
Yeah.
with all of my residents, and my little activity assistant Faith, who was leading the activity, and they were having this wildly animated conversation related. It's kind of like, would you rather, would you rather eat this or eat this? And so they were having this conversation, but the beauty of it is that you get to see how wonderful they are and how dynamic and how deep they really are, and that they're not just old people in a wheelchair. And trying to remind staff that they still want to have those conversations like they would if they went out to the bar, or if they they went and had brunch, or whatever it is, and meeting those needs and being able to bring that to them is fantastic. So what we all do is wonderful.
You're a national treasure, Brittany.
Thank you.
You
You know-
guys. Oh,
You
go
know,
ahead.
one time, some of the nurses at the Live Oak Living Center were complaining to my wife, Debbie, and saying, Debbie, you got to do something. Your thing about 5:30 reminded me of that, because it's when there are fewer staff members working, and for some reason people get more agitated and have a greater desire to move around at that moment. And they said to Debbie, what can you do? And Debbie said, well, let's have a community meeting at that time. And so people who were moving around a lot, going out one door, and then people have to go out and bring them back, and so forth, or going out another door. She positioned herself in the living room, which was right in the middle of those two doors, happened to be near a nursing station, and brought in some puppets and just did everything she did to generate energy. And after a while, those people who would go out, who were in motion, began to be calm. And after a while, those people who were healthier began to come and join. And the energy got so high that the nurses said to her, Debbie, we can't do our documentation because it's too energetic. And she said, well, it's either this or that. Which would you prefer?
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
You can't have your cake and eat it too. So that became a very important thing. So I credit you for being there at 5:30 with folks. Carmen, you were going to say something?
Yeah. Wow. A couple things just came together in my head all at the same time, like when you guys were talking. So, Barry, you just brought up the prime directive, and in your definition was the idea of nurturing. And you guys, I love thinking of creative ways to make change without making a lot of work. And we're talking about language, and I thought to myself, what if we all started referring to the nursing home as the nurturing home? Or what if we'd never called it a nursing home? What if we called it from the beginning the nurturing home?
Nurturing.
Now, of course, it sounds awkward, but the point would be the language, the word would say what it needs to be. It might promote every time you say it that, oh yeah, that's what we should do, right? And then Brittany, you happen to say, this is not just a little old lady in a wheelchair. And you're not going to believe this, you guys, that right here on my bulletin board, there was a home in New York. I have a note, right? It kind of inspires me. This says, that a home in New York used to be called the wheelchair home. Can you believe it?
That's horrible.
And notice how it all came together right there. So from the wheelchair home, and even probably worse titles, right, to the nursing home. How about we move it to the nurturing home?
In a nurturing home.
Wouldn't that be great?
It gets back to what I said from Gandhi. Your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your language. Your language becomes your actions. Your language defines your actions. Your actions become your habits, the way you do things, your practice. Your practice become your values. Bring your values to life, and your values shape your destiny. Wow. Wow, that's beautiful. A nurturing home. I love it. I
Let's do
love
it.
it.
Let's do
The
it.
nurturing home. The place where people come to get their new human spirit nurtured.
Yep.
Because depression kills. And there's depression that comes from biological reasons, and there's existential depression, and there's situational depression. And maybe I can't speak to how to fix the biological depression. I have a young friend who's been depressed for years, and had her first suicidal ideation at 10 years old. And she comes whenever she's in town. She lives in Denver, in Boulder. And wherever she's in town, she comes to see me, and I try to pump her up, and I can do it a little bit for a little while. And this time she was all lit up. I'd never seen anything like the transformation. I said, "What happened?" And she said, "I found a psychiatrist who didn't treat me as somebody suffering from this kind of disease, and he just helped me find the right medication. And since he found that medication, I'm just a happy person." So I don't know the answer to all that. I don't know what medications that we can promote, but I do know because one of the problems with nursing as opposed to nurturing homes is that these psychotropics have been used so often to control behavior and not to enhance people's capacity to be well. But I do know that in terms of situational depression, just changing the way we see the people we're working with to living human beings with a future, just like we are, is transformative. And to begin to see our environment as nurturing homes. Wow. Wow. So this is entering, Carmen, you have just entered into my new lexicon.
Good. Let's do it.
We're speeding down the highway towards transformation. Does
Barry.
anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes.
I've meant to ask you this like for years, but not very many people talk about this. I believe you're one of the few. And what I mean is, apparently we all are supposed to be supposedly developing and growing our entire life. And so, but nobody tends to talk about how are you growing and developing when you're 100, 80, 90, 100. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that, your knowledge of it. What does that mean, and how can we help people grow and develop?
I think that the second half will address that.
Okay.
As we talk about community meeting, but I'd like to speak to that.
Right.
I'd like to speak to first of all the way we see people, and the way that we see we're in the middle of we come into this life, we live this life, we leave this life, and we go into, depending on your belief system, we go into another realm of being, and our ability to be present doesn't have anything to do with cognition. Our ability to be, our essence, and our cognition are not one of the same. It's a very radical concept. It's not so radical that you're not agreeing with it, Brittany. So I remember at the Live Oak Living Center, there was a nurse in her 60s, a licensed vocational nurse, and every morning she would go up to a resident and say, Helen, do you mind if I move you to my nursing station to sit near me? And Helen would just beam at her. And what we taught our staff was that when you ask somebody if they would like to do something that we think might be good for them or good for us, if they say, give us any indication of resistance, then we honor the resistance. And if they don't respond, then we accept that as a positive. And so every morning she would move Helen to her nursing station. And having observed this for a while, one day I said to her, Mrs. Delane, how come you move Helen to your nursing station every day? And she said, I don't know, Barry. It just makes me feel good. And so then Helen died. And as we did for every resident, we had a memorial service. And at that memorial service, we invite family, friends, anybody we can contact who might know the person to come and join our community for the memorial service. And at that memorial service, there was somebody who had a picture of Helen, big picture of Helen, taken as she sat on a bluff overlooking Mendocino Point at the Pacific Ocean, doing yoga in the 1930s. And so here's a woman who had this spiritual practice from the 1930s on. And even though she was unable or unwilling or in a different place, not communicating, that energy came forth from her. At the same thought with my father-in-law. My father-in-law lived to be 105. And he was very present, but his cognition diminished, which in some ways was a shame for us because he was so brilliant. He was so brilliant, but his cognition diminished. But his ability to transmit love was very great. And I remember we had a memorial service with him after he passed. And one of his caregivers, he had 24-hour caregivers. And one of his caregivers said, I'd like to say something about Jerry. I only knew Jerry in the last couple of years of his life when he was not, I don't remember the word she used, but he was not cognitively as he had been earlier. And she said, but Jerry gave me my self-esteem. Jerry gave me my self-esteem. And so there's something that we have. There's something that we have all our lives. That again, when the human spirit is not diminished, if we treated Helen in a way that was unkind, if my father-in-law's caregivers were unkind to him, it may not be that he would have been able to give her his self-esteem by greeting her with love and lighting up every time he saw her. And so this is crucial. It is crucial that we help people to renew, to regenerate. We call our approach a regenerative community because we see it as a place where people are not becoming as they were, but regenerating into a new essence of themselves. And so maybe we'll take a 15-minute break now.
Yep. Yeah.
And we'll come back at 2:17.
Yep. Perfect.
I love you all so
15-minute break,
much.
everyone.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Barry. See y'all. Yep, in 15. Thanks. Some of us diehards will be here, Brittany and Dawn. Hope y'all can stay.
We're here.
Instead of leaving, everyone, bring someone back with you. How's that? See you in a bit.
Carmen. Carmen, it's Eric. Hey, Carmen, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Eric.
Hey, did you get anywhere with Bonnie Blue Jacket?
You know, I emailed, but never heard back from anybody.
Okay,
I think, I wondered, should I give them a call or not? I didn't know what to do or give them more time.
they have a brand new, a very inexperienced nursing home administrator there. And I think
Yeah.
Rick was looking at it as a great opportunity for some personal growth.
Absolutely.
I'll hit him up with another email and just see
Okay.
where they're at and then circle back to you.
I'd love, tell them I'm happy to talk to them if it would help, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Happy, no problem.
I think if they talk to you, they'll jump on board. It's just,
Yeah. I kind of feel that way too. Like I can explain what's hard, what's easy, how we can make it the easiest as possible. And, you know, it's kind of exciting.
yeah.
be
What
honest.
about Cody? Cody's nursing home.
What's it called? You know? Cody.
Oof. Well, it's attached to the hospital there. I mean, let me look, but they have their nursing home administrator there is Laura Moore that used to be at the Wyoming Retirement Center.
Okay.
Her name's Laura Carpenter now, but that might be another really good opportunity. I'll
Thank you.
I'll hit them both up about it.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'll
Wonderful.
follow up with Rick Schrader today.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate your help.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here today too.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Barry's kind of on fire about this. It's great to hear his
Mhm.
passion about it.
Yep. It sure is. Get them all to ourselves. I did upload the handout if anyone wants it. And Brittany, I know you can't do it that way, so I can email it.
Yes, please, because for whatever reason, my firewall's stupid.
Nah, it's okay. Probably whenever you're ready, Bear, we can start.
Anytime you're ready,
Yeah, anytime. Thank
slides
you.
up.
Oh, yes, that'd be helpful, wouldn't it? Oh, dear. Sorry. Here they come.
So good.
Here they come.
So let's look at the next one.
Mhm.
A question. If you were to describe the center of life within a nursing home,
Hmm.
where would it be?
Cafeteria?
Bingo.
Oh, boy. I got to add the nursing station, everyone. I just hear it so often, it's already come up today.
I hate to say it, but yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
So would you put the next slide on?
Mhm.
So what we decided, my friend Bob and I, we started the Live Oak Project together. Debbie joined us a year later. And when we decided, we were working in Alaska, we were working on the mental health plan for the city of Anchorage. And I said to him, when I get back, I'm going to work on, I want to find a nursing home, and I want to do a project there. And he said, well, what do you think you want to do? I said, I'd like to draw an X in time and space and come back there to the same time every day and weave a community. And so we approached my friend Harold knew a friend of his who knew the director of the home for Jewish parents in Oakland, the administrator of that home. And so we went to see him, and essentially he said, if you guys are on the up and up, you're what I'm waiting for. He said, because sometimes as administrator, I can't make the changes I want to make in the home. It has to happen from the bottom up. And so he did some exploring of who we are, and decided to take a chance on us and invite us into the home, and got the approval of the board of directors and all that. And so we decided that what we wanted to do was to come and create a community meeting there every day. And I'm going to be a little bit out of order, but maybe I won't. Maybe I'll stay with the order of my slides. Okay. So we decided to create a daily community meeting at the home. And some of the factors of a daily community meeting are that it becomes a place where people share their lives. Some family members become regulars. I can't tell you how many times a family member has said to me, I didn't know how to relate to my mother and when I visit her, but now I come and I sit next to her in the community meeting, and then we have lunch together. And occasionally we've heard from family members, and my relationship to my mother has never been better in all these years, because there's always been trouble before as at community meeting. And so people assume the role of elder. They're not residents, they're not patients, but we assiduously cultivate the role of elder amongst them. And by changing their role, they become empowered. And it becomes a place where new residents and staff members are introduced to the home. Staff members can come and hang out, are encouraged to come and hang out in the community meeting, take their breaks there, come and sit with a resident there, or a couple of residents. And residents develop a voice and choice in their lives. And information about what goes on in the home is shared. And managers report to residents. And the residents participate in the home's governance. And lo and behold, the human spirit thrives and grows. And so there are three foundations to community meeting. A shared belief system to guide individuals and the community in the way they act and relate. Remember, your ideas become your practice. The way we see the world becomes reality. And so our shared belief system, which we'll go into in a few minutes, is one key foundation. Another is a structure. And we didn't start with this structure, but it emerged over time, and it dawned on us that this is the way to teach it. So a community development structure and methodology to provide the matrix for the community, for the culture to grow. And then community developers to transform the role of activity professionals and others to that of community developers who take responsibility for the culture and promote change, continued learning. And from that role, they drive the effectiveness of the organization. They become, on many levels, the most important person within the organizational life. And so if you move to the next slide. So we walk into the nursing home. Now, aside from my experience with my grandmother in a nursing home, I had never been in one. And Bob and I spent about 10 months laying out what it is we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it, and figuring it all out. And I said to Bob, let's not read anything about aging. Let's figure this out for ourselves. Bob cheated, he read a book, but it was okay. And so we came into the very first community meeting and we asked the residents, well, we started with a song. Amen. It's the only song I could sing. Amen. 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 And after that, we said we're gonna come here every morning, have a community meeting, and nobody believed us. And then we said to the people, well, how do you see yourselves? And one man said, I came to America with nothing. I put 5 children through graduate school. And now in my time of need, what did they do? They put me here. None of them would take me into their home. And another person said, see that person over there? I'm like a piece of furniture. They even move me without asking me. And another person said, what does it matter anyway? My life is over. There's nothing left. And it was pretty chaotic in that very first meeting. People were yelling at each other, and they were, it was the first time they had an opportunity to get together, only to get together in a large group. And somebody would speak, and somebody else would say, shut up, you talk too much. And someone else would say, well, you keep quiet, I'll hit you with my cane. I've never seen anything like it. And yet in the middle of this chaos, we wanted to create some kind of unity. And so when we asked them how they saw each other, we said to them, that may be true, but to us, you're the elders of the people. And someone said, yeah, some elders. Now, before we went to that meeting, we had 2 things done. We went to a sign painter because there were no Kinkos in those days. We had 2 signs painted. And one was the definition of an elder, and the other was the live oak ethos. And so we took the definition of an elder down off the wall. We hung it up there, and we asked someone to read it. And could you put on the next slide, please? And would somebody like to read the live oak definition of an elder?
Don or Brittany, would you care to read it?
Sure.
Thank you.
An elder is a person who is still developing, still growing, and still learning, still a learner, sorry, still with potential, and whose life continues to have within it promise for a connection to the future. An elder is still in pursuit of happiness, joy, and pleasure, and her or his bright birthright, good Lord, to these remains intact. Moreover, an elder is a person who deserves respect and honor, and whose work it is to synthesize wisdom from sorry, my glasses are preventing me from reading, from long life experience, and formulate this into a legacy for future generations. Sorry, guys.
So can you see how this provides a new way of seeing the role of a person in a nursing home? And so we asked a person to read it. It was a woman who was sitting next to her husband, and in a very elegant way she read it. And her husband, who hadn't said anything for years, stood up and very quietly began to sing the song we opened the meeting with, Amen, and got everybody singing. And since we were looking for, we were decidedly wanting to create a culture, we asked them, we took this as our first ritual, to have someone read the definition of an elder and to sing the Amen song after it. And so that became our first ritual. And if we look at the next slide, since we're here to talk about enhancing and recruiting staff members coming to homes, last night I was playing with it, and I came up with a definition of staff members. And if you don't mind, I'll read this. A staff member is a person who is still developing, still growing, still a learner, still with potential, and whose life continues to have within promise for and connection to the future. A staff member is in pursuit of happiness, joy, and pleasure, and her or his birthright to these remains intact. Moreover, a staff member is a person who deserves respect and honor for what one knows, has learned, and continues to learn and contribute. Now, with that shift within the nurturing home, within that shift, can you see, especially if they now pass legislation that adds to the wages of caregivers, could you see how a person would really want to be part of that team that sees that person as learning and growing and developing and cares about their happiness and joy and pleasure and sees them having promise for who they can become? You know, first day on the job, my wife Debbie was interviewing a woman to be a direct caregiver. And Debbie asked her about herself, and she was describing how she was a nurse in Pakistan, an RN. And as she described herself, Debbie said to her, you know, when are you going to get your license here? And she said, well, I'm just preparing to take my test. And Debbie said to her, well, someday you're going to be our director of nursing. she saw her potential, and she was the director of nursing, fabulous director of nursing. And so, a staff member deserves respect and honor. Deserves respect and honor. And is valued for what one knows, has learned, and continues to learn and contribute. When we started the first Live Oak project, there was a doc who came to work with us. She was a Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Fellow, a very prestigious fellowship. And they really didn't want her to come to work with us because we were just starting out with this project, and there were a number of prestigious organizations that were offering her a place to do her clinical work, but she chose to work with us. And after we were doing our community meeting for a couple of months, the nursing assistants, this was before there were CNAs, these were just the NAs, said to us, we want to have our meeting too. And Carol said, I'd like to facilitate that meeting. And so Carol sat with them. It was the first time in the lives of any of them that a doc sat with them and took seriously what they knew. And she wrote for her paper. She had to write a final paper. And she wrote for her paper what physicians can learn from nursing assistants, in which she talked about all the things that she learned from the nursing assistants, how she valued them. So this is really important. And if we begin to change the way we see all staff members from this lens, it could be really radical and profound. So this was the definition of an elder was the first thing that we took down that we wanted to teach about. The second piece that we took down was, if we go to the next slide, was what we called the Live Oak ethos. We wanted to very briefly put together a way of seeing ourselves and the elders seeing themselves that could become part of their lives. And so the first thing we said was, life is good, totally countervailing the whole image of how they saw themselves. You know, old dogs can learn new tricks. We apologize saying we don't see anybody as an old dog here, but you know, it's obvious. It's obvious because the thinking is that you're finished with learning and growing. We are the elders. We are elders. We live in the present, draw from the past, prepare for the future. Remember, I spoke about how people are seen as not being connected to the narrative of their lives, and how when my grandmother was in the nursing home, there was no idea whatsoever of who they could become, of what her potential was. So we wanted to create a real, meaningful present tense. The role we have is the role we choose. And I remember this woman, Dorothy, holding up her arm, which was paralyzed, and saying, how can I have a good role if my arm is like this? And Bob said, you know, we're saying this with the utmost respect, but even if your arm is like that, you can choose to see yourself in a positive way or in a negative way. And this is what we mean by, we really wanted to challenge even the stereotypes of the residents themselves. By serving one another, we serve ourselves. And the last one we added later, and I'll talk about how that got added, because we didn't think of it early on. Death is part of everyday life in the community. At that very first community meeting, we said to the residents, one of the residents said to us, what are you doing here, two grown men? Why aren't you out making a living? What are you going to do with your lives? And we said, well, this is our work. We're here because this is what we're here to do. Well, what do you want to do with us? What do you think you can do? We're here to begin right here and begin a movement to transform the nature of aging in America. Pretty bold for a couple of guys, you know, to come up with that, but that was what we believed. And indeed, we were evaluated by a group from the School of Gerontology at USC. And in the evaluation, they said that our oft-stated boast that we want to change the nature of aging in America may not be far-fetched. But that day, at that very first community meeting after we said that, this man here, Ken Fox, in this picture, came up to us. He sauntered up to us. I don't know if saunters is the right word. I have no idea how he walked. He had a stroke. He wiped out most of his left side. You can see his arm here, like the way his arm is. It's frozen. You know, he had toilet paper in his mouth to keep from choking to death on his own saliva because his ability to salivate was uncontrollable. He couldn't swallow. And he came up to me and he went like this. And like this, Don, like this. He went like this. And then he pointed to everybody and he went like this again. And he pointed at Bob and me again and did this once more for good measure. And he laughed and his belly, which was non-existent, moved up and down and he wandered off. And I went into the social worker and I said, who is that guy? Who is that guy who doesn't speak and who did this? I showed her what he did. And she laughed and said, that's Ken Fox. Mr. Fox was the last Jewish member of the Berlin legislature when the Nazis took over. And he came to this country and he became a social activist. And his bag was from the 40s on, he became advocating for elders, for seniors. And after a stroke, left him unable to speak. He sort of went into a deep malaise. And he emerged as the leader of our first Live Oak community in 1977. So the next day he came to a community meeting. And he brought with him a note. It was on a quarter size of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And on it he had written, and I'm not sure whether he didn't type so well because of the stroke or because English was a second language, but he had a note that we could decipher, and it said, if you think you can do that with these people, you are crazier than they are. And so we asked him, do you mind if we read this to the 18 or 20 or so people who were assembled there? And he was enthusiastic about that. And so we read it to everybody and we said, well, what do you think of that? And once again, we contextualized what he was referring to by do this with these people, which is to start a movement here. And there was actually a discussion that began to take place. And so, you know, in those days, there wasn't even an activity director in homes, you know, and so Mr. Fox began bringing in notes, and they got longer and longer and longer. One day he brought in a note that said, this was during the administration of President Ronald Reagan, and he said, President Reagan is having a White House conference on aging, and they want to have a conference in every community, and we think we should go to the one in Alameda County. So we took dictation from the community and typed up a note that went to the head of the area agency on aging. And a week later, Mr. Fox came to the meeting and he was just down, completely down. And he handed me the letter from the head of the Alameda County Conference on Aging, and said, "We're sorry, but we're not equipped. We're not equipped to host nursing home residents."
Mm.
And so by this time we were like a year into the whole process, and now people were animated and they were really participating. And we said, well, what should we do? And someone said we should go anyway, and we should have a press conference outside. And another elder said, my father told me never to blindside anybody. We should tell them we're going to come and have a news conference. And so they wrote a letter back to him saying, that's fine, but we're going to have a press conference outside, asking why we're not invited to come inside to participate in the White House Conference on Aging. And within days, they got a letter back saying, I'm sorry, can I come and talk to your community meeting? And he came to the community meeting and he invited them. And then Mr. Fox had a letter written that said, but how about nursing home issues? Are they going to be on the conference? And he said no. And so they held a news conference anyway outside to say, why aren't nursing home residents issues as part of the conference agenda? And so that was pretty awesome. You know, another time, if you turn to the next slide. One of my favorite people in the world, not my favorite, my wife, Deborah Cushman Barkin, was in the role of social worker. And every time somebody would enter into the home, they would have to go through, they'd have to sit with her. Here they are, you know, for many people, coming to the home was the worst day of their lives. You know, it's not like going off to college. And she would have to sit with them. And she would have to go through all these questions that they had to ask them. And then she would have to read them two versions of their resident rights, the state version and the federal version. And by that time they were falling asleep and they were fidgeting and uncomfortable. And so she decided that this had to change. And so she went to the community meeting. This was at the Live Oak Living Center. And she said, how would you like, she reminded them of how it was on their first day. And she said, how do you think we should we should inform you of your rights? Because to the residents, it seemed like they were saying, you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to an attorney. And they said, you should sing their rights to each new person when she comes in. And she said, well, will you write me a song? And we had a group that met once a week called the Live Oak Poets Workshop. And they wrote a song. So the next thing we did is we went to see the head of the department of the health department for the Department of Licensing and Certification for the local region. And Debbie explained to them the dilemma and said, this is their song, and the residents have asked us to read it to them, and it's their right to have it their way. And they said, well, okay, have the residents sing their song to them. You sing their song to them. And then a few days later, when they're comfortable, then you can read them their official rights. And so maybe we can look at the song. It's on the next slide. Wherever you are, muted, sing along with me. Now remember, I'm not a great singer either. Some of you may be.
Let's sing, you guys. Dawn.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Our
Our
rights go marching on. We have the right to worship and to pray just as we please. We have the right to raise our own flags way up in the breeze. We have the right to watch the clouds and sit under the trees. Our rights go marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Our rights go marching on. Next slide, please. We have the right to greet our friends and the right to entertain. When we ask about, when we can recommend new changes, and it's our right to complain. We're entitled to a privacy and a room that has our name. Our rights go marching on. Now this one, the last verse was a little bit hard for the nurses to take. Our bodies are our own, from our heads down to our toes. When we ask about our meds, don't you treat us like your foes. We are a group of elders who have the right to know. Our rights go marching on. So in a little while, I'll tell you how we use that. So after she would sing it to people when they would come in on that first day. Oh, and they had to sign the song. The head of the health department said they had to sign and date the song. So they signed and dated the song. So the daily community meeting is the single most important approach in building a resident-centered community. It's also the locus of life within the home. Remember, I asked you to describe where life is? And Brittany, you said bingo, and Don, you said the dining room. These are very important places, but the community meeting becomes the center of life within the home, not only for the residents, but for the staff and the administrators. And I'll tell you a little bit about how that happened, some stories about that in a little while. But let's go to the next slide, which is about the structure of community meeting. Remember, I said there were three foundations to the community development. One is our belief system, you know, the definition of an elder, our ethos. The second is the structure of community meeting. So the first thing that goes on in community meetings is that we welcome each person. And I mean, really, we welcome each person. We go around and we shake each person's hand if it's okay to touch them, of course. And we don't really let go until they make eye contact with us, until they respond. And it's inevitable that they do. But what it does is it brings them right into the circle of community. And then we have an exercise program. Now, it's very interesting that the exercise program that we developed is the same exercise program that Debbie does now every morning. And as she says, well, I'm 73 now, I'm the age of some of the residents, and it works for me. And so we'd start with the head and go down to the feet and move every muscle, every body part. And then we would do an opening song. Now, it's very important if you're going to have a daily community meeting that the community comes up with an opening song and a closing song. So then we have the opening song. And then we have our community news. And our community news is really the happening place. So imagine a new person comes into the home. As it happened with one person, I'll tell you a story. She came into the home and we asked her about herself, and she told us about herself, and then she started to cry. And the community developer said to her, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "This is the saddest day of my whole life. I never thought I would end up in a place like this." And across the circle, somebody said to her, "You know, Anne, I felt the same exact way on the day I came in, but this is a pretty good place and I have a pretty good life here. So maybe we can be friends and I can help you find your way here. I can help you find your life here." And after the meeting, they went off together. And so, and they became good friends. And so, and after they tell us about themselves and the residents speak a little about the community, we say, "Now we'd like to tell you what your rights are." and everybody in the community would sing them the resident right song. And so one of the things that became very important for us, and when we talk about staff retention, it's the way that right off the bat that staff members learn that this is a place where if your heart is in the right place, it's the place where you want to be. And if it's not in the right place, well, maybe it's just as well you don't work here. You know, but during orientation, the first thing the staff developer, the staff educator does is to explain to them about the importance of community meeting and the importance of building community and how we see residents not as patients, but as the elders of the people. And so the staff member, the staff developer would then bring the new staff member into the community meeting. And lo and behold, they would sing, all the residents. Imagine a new staff member worked in other nursing homes before. First day, first thing that happens in orientation, brought to the community meeting and standing in the middle of the circle. And the residents are saying to her, so tell us about yourself. And you have kids, you have family, where are you from, where have you worked before, what's important to you, all questions coming out of the residents themselves. And then you know, asking about their culture, you know, letting them know that we honor every culture here. And then saying, we have a song we'd like to sing to you. And then singing the resident right song to the new staff member. So that's one of the things that would happen during the community news. It would be a place where the news was alive and the presence of a new resident or a new staff member would be significant. It would also be a place where staff members would talk about the first thing they want, residents rather, first thing they wanted to talk about was the menu. The menu. And so the head of the kitchen, the head of the dining services, and the administrator came down and someone said, we need more liver. And someone else said, I hate liver. And so on, it went on and on as they were starting to reach a consensus about some changes they wanted to see in the menu. But one of the things they began to realize was how complex it was in the nursing home. And of course, as things changed over time, there always became an option for everybody, or a series of options for everybody. But that was one thing. Then they would invite staff members to come and the director of nurses to come during the community news to address issues that they wanted to address. Or the administrator. I remember one time at the first community where we did our work, the Jewish home in Oakland, the residents complained because there was an elevator door. And it was a fire-rated elevator door and they had trouble moving it. And someone said, you know, let's get Abramovich down here because we need a modern elevator door. Don't forget, these were old buildings. A modern elevator door that you don't pull out, but that opens, you press a button, it opens on its own. And so Mr. A, as they called him affectionately, came down and they said to him, we can't move the elevator door. We need a new elevator door. And because the building had 3 stories. And he then explained to them about a capital budget and how budgeting worked in the home. And he described to them how every year it's the first thing in his capital budget, and it's the first thing the board of directors takes off capital budget. And they said, well, who's in charge of the board of directors? And he said, well, it's a woman, her name is Faye Selinger, who happened to be 70 years old, not so young herself, although, you know, it's looking younger and younger to me every day. And so they said, get her down here. They were empowered, get her down here. And so they sent out an invitation for her to come to community meeting, and she came to community meeting, and she said, they started talking to her about the elevator door, and she said, well, let me go try it. And they moved behind her en masse, some on walkers, some in wheelchairs, some with a cane. one or two just walking on their own, and they walked to the elevator door, and she tried to open it, and lo and behold, it was heavy. And she said, "This will be fixed." And she went back and she brought it up to the board of directors and said, "I'm not going to take no for an answer. This must be done now. It must be added to the capital budget. I don't care how we do it." And she came back the next week and she said, "Mr. A will be taking bids on the replacement of the elevator door, and I guarantee you'll have a new elevator door within a month or 6 weeks." Imagine how the residents felt having the power to change the elevator door. And so this is what goes on during community news. It becomes a place where whatever's going on. So we're painting a hallway today. And so the head of maintenance would come and describe what was going on in that hallway today, so that all information became shared with the residents, which is a salient element, a salient factor in the transformation of institution to community. It becoming a place where where information is shared. And then we have community news, world news, a discussion of the day, whatever people would want to talk about. Often it would be the activity professional, the community developer bringing something. Other times people would come. One day somebody came and brought something from the newspaper that said they're going to be building a huge housing development right behind our home in the hills. And they sent word to the planning commission, and the next thing we knew, the planning commission was there, the developer was there at community meeting, and the Sierra Club was there, who were opposing this because the hills were unstable. And as a result of that community meeting, they threw out the what, I forget what the word is now, for the plan that you do before the environmental impact study. And they threw out the environmental impact study because of what happened in our community meeting at the home. And so it's engaging, it's bringing the home into the world, and these things happen in the community meeting. So this is about the structure of community meeting, and then of course we end with a closing song. When we sing, in every place they want to sing "God Bless America." And always I would like to say, when we sing "God Bless America," let's sing it as the elders beseeching God to bless America with peace, to bless America with brotherhood. And so that's the structure for a daily community meeting. And believe me, daily is so important that at the Live Oak Living Center one time, they said, let's do it 6 days a week. And so they had it 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. And then after a while, they said, well, we want a day off, and they went back to 5 days. But daily community meeting in the morning, really important. So if we look at the next slide. The community developer's role. Remember I said there are three foundations to the creation of community. The first is the value system that we teach. The second is the structure of community meeting. And the third is the role of the community developer. And so can you get that dark thing off there, please, Carmen?
Yeah. Sorry.
It's all good.
It's you. I'm watching you. Okay.
So the community developer is the primary organizer of community meeting. The community developer is responsible for continuity, consistency. One thing I want to say that I didn't say before about the structure of community meeting is that it is flexible. It was not given on Sinai on tablets. Some days we don't even get beyond the news of the home. it's alive, it's a living thing. And the community developer is the one who holds it together, provides the glue on. So the community developer is really a change maker, a champion who champions each person's quality of life, promotes the person-centered culture, and builds a continued learning community within the home. And when I say continued learning community, you know, what happens again and again is that the residents, the staff members who participate, they come, they learn, they grow, they become more than they were when they came into the home. When we came into the Live Oak Living Center, it almost embarrasses me to tell this story. The previous owners had a man who had a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And he would constantly wander around the home. And so the way they dealt with it was that they did a hook and eyelet a hook and eye into the floor, and they drilled a hole in the floor, put a hook in the floor, and then they put a bicycle chain through the eye and through the wheel of his wheelchair and held him there. And so, of course, one of the first things we did when we saw what happened was that we liberated him. And you know, and he had a lot of cognitive impairment, but he began to grow and to actively participate in community meeting. In the poets workshop, when they would be hung up on a word, he would come up with the word that was needed. In community meeting, he was elected the president of the residence council because he was continually learning and growing. And so we see the community meeting as a place of learning and growth, and the community developer as a person who promotes that. And so if we go to the next slide, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the roles of community developer. So the first role is as a teacher. And that first day when we went into a community and we took down off the wall our definition of an elder, and people began to make it their own. And you know, after about 6 months or so, they said, we want to name the community meeting, we want to be known as the Council of Elders. And so they became the Council of Elders. And people would learn and grow. And we took down the ethos, and we would teach from the ethos. And so one of the important roles of the community developer would be as a teacher. And so, but the community developer also, we learned more from the residents and from the process than we taught. And so we were not only the teachers, but we were the learners. It was all a constant learning experience for us. And so that's one role. You notice how it's balanced, one against the other, the teacher and the learner. The next role as a community member, as a participant. You know, maybe one of the worst things that makes an institution is that people leave who they are at the door. Staff members leave who they are at the door when they walk in, and they assume their role. And this distances them from the person in the nurturing home. It distances them because now they're able to shut out people, not to relate to people, and they're not a member anymore. They never were a member. And so a community developer is a member of the community, a participant, shares their lives. Mira Khan, who Bob and I started the community meeting, and everybody said, well, this is great. You know, it's two men who do it. You know, can a woman do it? And so Mira Khan came in as a volunteer, and within a matter of weeks, she was the community developer doing a better job than Bob and I ever could do. And so So Mira spun off small groups from the community meeting, developed our first exercise program, and then lo and behold, her husband got sick with cancer, and he was dying. And one day she came to community meeting, and this normally very cheerful, happy, positive, perky woman was really down. And one of the residents said to her, "Mira, what's the matter? What's wrong with you today?" And she said, Sam, who she talked about in community meetings, talked about Sam or kids, because she was a member, not just a leader. Sam has cancer. And every day she would come into community meeting, and every day they would ask her what's going on with Sam. And they became her support system. So she was a member of the community, a participant in the community, and at the same time, she was a leader. She was a leader of the community, and she helped them. She helped them in learning how to formulate. When the letters were written to the heads of the various of the area agents, she helped them to formulate that letter. She helped them to keep it moving. She would come up with programs to bring in for the discussion of the day. She was truly a leader. The other thing she had to become was the advocate for the community and for the individual residents. Now, advocacy, Don, you may know this better than any of us. Advocacy is a very tricky thing, because when you go in to advocate for someone, then the person to whom you're advocating becomes defensive. Is this the case? Do you find this to be the case?
Yep.
Yep. Very succinct, very real, very real. And so one day, but we couldn't think of what do you balance advocate with? What do you balance advocate with? In the same way that you're balancing a teacher and a learner, a leader and a community member, what do you balance an advocate with? So one day we're doing an in-service. And one day as we're doing the in-service, we always invited residents. We had a room that was called the Learning Center, which is where we did the teaching. And we always announced to the residents that there'd be an in-service today. And today's in-service was on community meeting. And a few residents showed up. And one resident had, I hate the term dementia. I really hate the term dementia. At best, maybe we can call it cognitive frailty. But even that doesn't describe where a person is in their life's journey. But she had a diagnosis of dementia of the Alzheimer's variety. And we're going through this whole thing of what a teacher is and a leader is. And there are 11 CNAs in the room, and a leader and a community member. And we say, and an advocate. And we ask the people who are attending the in-service, the staff training, what it is that they thought could balance an advocate. And as always, we got no response from them. And then all of a sudden, this resident who had this diagnosis of dementia of the Alzheimer's variety said, "You forgot a love. You can't advocate without love." Our staff developer picked up on that immediately and said, yes, love is what lubricates advocacy. What's love based in? Love is based in respect. Love is based in kindness. Love is based in being able to identify with the person that you're dealing with. And so that became our our reference point, our balance point to advocacy. So then it became teacher and learner, leader and community member, advocate and love. And so what the community developer began to take really seriously is that when you go in and advocate for a resident, start by being positive, start by being kind, start by being respectful, start by being loving. And it transformed her life because every time she had to go and advocate, it was so burdensome that she would be bucking the system. But now it became transformative for her. And so these became the 6 guideposts, the six guideposts for the roles of the community developer. You know, I said earlier that we need to see the nurturing home. You see, I've already changed, Carmen.
Great.
We need to see the nurturing home as a spiritual environment. And we need to see the work that we do as spiritual work. Of course, the CNA has to help a person get dressed. Of course, the CNA has to clean up a mess. You know, but she's doing it for a person, and that person has a spirit, and that spirit needs to be enhanced. That spirit can be diminished by talking down to a person. That spirit can be diminished by rushing your way through the person. That spirit can be diminished by not saying what you're doing and why. All these things diminish the human spirit. And so as we're looking around and thinking about, well, what might be the community developer's creed? You know, we came upon this prayer of St. Francis. Now, St. Francis was a very cool dude.
Mhm.
And he got this he was a wealthy young man who had no values, no principles, and was into getting drunk and running around. And one day he heard this message that had enough power that he said, the message was, St. Francis, build me my church. And within 3 years, he had a whole order of St. Francis. And the thing that maybe he's most remembered for in universal circles is the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. So that's the first thing we want to do as a community developer, is to promote peace. To promote peace, to calm the anger that goes on that people have. Where there is hatred, you know, there are a lot of people who in the nurturing home have preconceived notions of others, and they're hostile towards them or hateful towards them. And so where there's hatred, let me bring love. Where people take offense, let me bring pardon. Let me help them to forgive one another. And we do that by asking forgiveness ourselves, because in all these things, the way we do these things is by demonstrating them ourselves, by living them out. Where there is discord in the community, let me bring harmony. Where there's error, where people have misconceptions, where people see an old person as decrepit, as useless, let me bring truth that this person is learning, growing, developing with vast potential. Where there's doubt about what we can accomplish, let me keep the faith alive. When people in the nursing home are so depressed because it's post-COVID and they work double shifts and they took care of people and they're depressed and they have doubt in what they're doing, let me bring faith, let me bring hope to them. Where there is despair, let me bring that hope. Where there is darkness, let me bring light. Let me bring a song. Let me bring joy. And where there is sadness, let me bring joy. And so we called this the Community Developers Creed. And early on, remember I told you how difficult those first weeks were? I remember one day I was so frustrated in the community meeting, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. And one of the residents, she had bleached blonde hair that was always well carved in the beauty parlor. Another center, by the way, Brittany, of the nurturing home is the beauty parlor, you know. And she always wore a lovely house coat to the community meeting. And she looked at me and she said in a very raspy voice, apparently was a smoker all her life, and she said, "You've got to keep the faith. It's not always going to be easy in the beginning. You've got to keep the faith. You have your moments in which you're down. Keeping the faith doesn't mean you don't get down. Keeping the faith means that you bounce up again. You bounce up again. So now it's time for our Q&A, as the program says.
Well, does anyone have any questions for Barry? Here's your chance. And actually, we went longer, which was even better, Barry, because that means we got more of you.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo! I knew you guys would. I couldn't interrupt them, especially not during a prayer, right?
Right.
Oh, this is
Really
so great.
enjoyed it, Barry.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Thank
Me
you. And Carmen,
too.
if you can arrange it as part of the work you're doing there, we'd love to be able to teach community meeting in Wyoming to the folks there if they're interested in learning about how to go further with it.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Barry, thanks for everything you've always ever done.
Carmen, thank you for everything you've always ever done.
Oh, we so admire you and thank you. Brittany and Dawn and Eric, thanks for hanging in there. Oh, hey, you guys, real quick, please, for the grant, give me 2 numbers. Sounds like bingo. Knowledge of this subject beforehand and knowledge after, please.
2-5.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Thank you. Eric, you still there? I'll get with Eric later. Okay.
Yeah, I was a 3 and now I'm a 4.
I
I love you all. Thank you so much for,
Yes, you too.
being here today.
love you too.
Thank you, Barry.
You can
Thanks,
get,
Barry.
you can
Thanks
get my
so much.
email address on your handouts if you want to talk with me.
Yeah.
Will
Be
do.
well, everyone.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.